You know how RTS games have kinda died off, and even the ones that come out nowadays just aren't fun anymore. Even the good ones. You play through a campaign, maybe do a few skirmishes, and after a couple of weeks you're done, you move on. And that's it. Compare that to how it used to be. Age of Empires 2, StarCraft, Battle for Middle-earth, Command & Conquer. People were playing those for months, years. You would come back to them constantly. There was something in there that kept pulling you back, and you didn't even fully understand why. That thing is gone now, and I've been thinking about why for a long time. Not just as someone who's been playing these games since I was a kid, but as someone who's actually worked on developing strategy games myself and is currently building one myself. So I kind of feel this from both sides. And what I've landed on is that it's not really about features or budget or the market. It goes deeper than that. That's why I want to touch on some points here that I very rarely hear people mention. Chapter 1. The people who made those games are gone, replaced by something much worse. Think about what Stronghold 1 was doing back in 2001. It simulated an entire medieval ecosystem. Food supply chains, peasant morale, fire spread, tax rates, siege physics, popularity ratings. All of it on a machine with 128 megabytes of RAM. And it worked flawlessly and looked absolutely timeless and beautiful. You put the disc in, it ran, and nothing broke. Then the sequels came. Each one technically more advanced on paper, better graphics, more features, and so on. And still, somehow each one felt less alive, less real. By the time they released Warlords, it felt like a corporate mobile game. Same franchise name, but completely different soul. You can say the same thing about Heroes of Might and Magic. Heroes 3 is still the one. The community never really moved on from it. Every sequel since has been objectively more advanced, but somehow not worth your time. Heroes 7, for example, came out in 2015, and nobody talks about it anymore. Everyone still talks about 3 though. That's not nostalgia, that's a verdict. And this isn't just a gaming thing, it's the same story everywhere. There is this pattern that shows up across music, film, gaming, and pretty much everything. First generation builds something that feels genuinely alive, and then it gets handed off, scaled up, iterated on, and slowly hollowed out until what's left looks like the same but feels like nothing. The people who made the original RTS games, and overall video games in general, were a specific kind of person. They weren't just talented. They had this almost irrational drive to make something that had never existed before, working with almost nothing. Small teams, no safety net, no publisher breathing down their neck. That constraint is what made them creative in ways that comfort would never have. There was a certain masculine, almost Faustian spirit to it. You had to be a bit obsessive, a bit reckless, and willing to spend years on a system that might not even work. They were basically inventing the whole genre firsthand. These weren't people optimizing for a roadmap. They were people trying to build worlds without getting their mind clouded by the internet. That generation moved on and didn't get a proper replacement. The studios got bought, shut down, resurrected, and what replaced them was a, let's call it, different kind of development. Bigger teams, more oversight, more people whose entire job purpose was rather questionable. Significantly worse coders and artists, NPC writers, and so on. I don't want to hate too much on the modern studios, but I think you get the point. Most importantly though, the soul didn't get passed down. Because soul doesn't transfer in an acquisition agreement. Chapter 2. The clock is running out on the core audience. Here's something nobody really wants to say out loud, but the people who grew up on these games are getting old. The kid who was playing Age of Empires 2 in 1999 is pushing 40 now, and is gonna look for a place at a retirement home soon. In another decade, the generation that had an emotional connection to this genre, the people who feel something when they hear, will be mostly out of the active market. And RTS games never successfully passed the torch. There was no moment where a teenager in 2016 discovered Age of Empires and made it their thing. The genre never had its Minecraft moment. It just became a sealed archive. loved intensely by the people who remember it, but invisible to almost everyone who came after. The audience isn't leaving, it's literally aging out. Chapter 3. The community loved itself into a corner. RTS fans are the most loyal people in gaming. It's honestly impressive, and also kind of a disaster. When a decent new RTS drops, the community goes, looks cool, wishlists it, maybe plays it for a few weeks, then goes right back to the same queue they've been running since 2004. The new game sells maybe 40k copies, the publisher calls the genre dead, and everyone moves on. Self-fulfilling prophecy every single time. The most brutal recent example is Stormgate, with a studio that raised tens of millions, staffed up with veterans from StarCraft and Warcraft, had the full backing of the community going on, and still flopped. The RTS community hyped it up for months, played it for 3 weeks, complained about the art style and went back to the classics. And honestly, both sides share the blame here. The game shipped unfinished and the community never gave it a real chance either. Chapter 4. The industry did the math and moved on. Publishers didn't abandon RTS games because they stopped being good. They left because the math just isn't mathing anymore. A live service shooter makes much more in a single weekend from cosmetic sales than most strategy games make in their entire lifetime. Fortnite doesn't ask you to manage resource chains and micromanage unit positioning. It gives you a dopamine hit every 90 seconds and sells your skin. It works and shareholders love it. So the big studios left, EA shut down Command & Conquer, Microsoft sat on Age of Empires for years before touching it again. Blizzard, the studio that literally invented half this genre, had people internally pitching new RTS games for years, but kept getting told there was no appetite for it. Indie devs are the last line of defense. And speaking of people who are actually trying, the only reason this genre still has a pulse is indie developers on Steam who genuinely love it, not as an IP to monetize, but the way that the original devs back in the days did. Games like There Are Billions, Northgard, Tempest Rising, these exist because someone cared more about making the right game than building a scalable product. Steam gave them a place to exist without needing to sell 50 million copies to survive. I've been working on an RTS game of my own for a while now. You can follow the devlogs right here in this channel if you want to see what it actually looks like from the inside. I'm very well aware of the fact that I can't really live up to the level of polish that I've been praising in those classic old games, but I know that my game has soul and has a true understanding of the genre behind it, which is much more important than the budget. Anyways, all of these problems are even present in the indie space though. A solid game drops, the community plays it for a month, finds something they don't like, and then retreats to the classics. The developer patches into diminishing returns. The game fades, and it's not malicious by those gamers, it's just what happens when your audience is attached to games from 25 years ago, which is actually pretty impressive to be honest. What these games actually were. Before we close this, it's worth saying what actually made these games different, because it wasn't the systems, it wasn't the graphics, it wasn't even the game design. It was that the people who made them gave a damn. You could feel it. Age of Empires 2 didn't care if you were entertained every second. It cared if you were thinking. Warcraft 3 trusted you to figure it out without holding your hand through every hour. These games had opinions, standards. They were built by people who wanted to show you something, not retain you. When you won, it was not because your loadout was broken for the current meta, not because a battle pass gave you a stat advantage, but because you genuinely outthought another person across 45 minutes of true chaos. And that felt like you really won. That feeling barely exists anymore in gaming in general. And like I said at the start, this is bigger than just games. The same thing happened to film, the music, and pretty much every creative industry. A first generation with something to prove builds something alive. Then the industry scales up around them, the suits move in, and what's left is technically fine, but completely hollow. That shift is real, and it's everywhere. And gaming is just a very clean example of it, because the before and after is so obvious. You can feel the difference the second you boot up an old game. The genre isn't dead, it's just on life support, kept alive by aging fans, a handful of indie devs who still care, and communities that remove to move on. Maybe that's enough. Maybe the next person who builds something real in this space is already working on it right now. I would like to think so. Either way, support the new ones when they're good and give them an actual shot. Or just load up Stronghold Crusader again. Maybe that's the smartest move and it's just over. Anyways, subscribe to my channel if you're into strategy games, and I'll see you next time.